Well, good evening, everyone. I'm glad that you're joining us tonight as we come together to talk to you a little bit about our church's response to the quarantine and to COVID-19. I will begin by telling you or reminding you that our church is still in lockdown. We are still in phase 4 and we've been following the state. So what you're going to hear tonight are just some plans that we have moving forward. We want you to know that we're working really hard to make sure that when we can open our doors, we will be ready to do it in a way that everyone is safe. So I have some folks that you will recognize with me here in the parlor tonight. We have Tim Rickman and Jay Dunstan from our Compass team. Jennifer Tripoli is here, our executive director. And we're going to walk you through the results of our survey, the survey that many of you took. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what our plans are, what it will look like when we finally get to reopen. Tim, do you want to take it from here?
Sure. Thank you, Myra. I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad we're able to talk tonight about the survey results. I know this quarantine and this coronavirus has been especially hard for all of us. Of course, we're most concerned about those that have been directly affected with health issues and those that they love. But even those who haven't have been disconnected from the church and in many ways. And we hope that sharing the survey will help to give you some perspective on what others are thinking. It was so great to hear from you all who were able to submit information, and we hope you'll appreciate hearing from us tonight. So as we get started, I'll kind of talk about the agenda. We'll get into the summary of the survey that I'll talk about, and then Jay will get into the detail. Jay did a lot of work spearheading the survey, studying what other conferences are doing and that sort of thing. So we'll be glad to get into that. Then we'll get into some of the stages of reentry, some of the work Jennifer and her team have been doing about planning for our reentry steps in coordination with the guidance that we received from the governor and our Methodist Conference. So without further ado, we'll get into the summary of the findings. The first thing I'll point out is we received 221 submissions, 210 over the web and 11 in hard copy. And this number is actually pretty high. Jennifer, what do we normally, before the quarantine, we're getting average attendance on Sunday, what?
Around 400.
400 or so, yeah. And these submissions more like represent households. I know in my case, my wife and I each submitted one, but we represent 6 people if you count our kids. Many married couples, just one of them submitted. So this is quite a significant response. Her team also sent out hard copies to some of those who are not able to access the technology. And I also want to mention too, we appreciate Sam Garrett and the work done there in the office to get everything online. So the summary results are as follows, and we'll share with you the data so you can draw your own conclusions. But what we see is that there is a majority interest in returning, but certainly with precautions. And we'll go through some of what individuals are saying regarding those precautions. Also, there is an encouragement and really an expectation that the church will do work to create a healthy environment upon return, as certainly we'd expect and you should expect, and we'll do that. But also a strong willingness from the congregation to take personal precautions and to be flexible with changes that may be needed to support social distancing and a safe environment. And so we think that's great. Not surprising. We know that we're part of a loving and respectful Christian community, and we're concerned about those in particular who are at risk. And so it's great to see that in the survey results that individuals are willing to take their own precautions. Finally, of course, we took an opportunity to ask about the online worship experience. The team has been doing an incredible job pulling it together every week. A sudden surprise to have to do that, and it's continued to get better. And we got a lot of good feedback from you all on that. So without further ado, Jay, why don't we get into the charts themselves?
All right, thank you, Tim. Before I start, I think it would be good for everyone to know why we're doing this survey. We're very fortunate to have in our congregation Patrick Calhoun. And Patrick, as you well know, had a lot to do with what happened with the rebirth of the church and the renovation. And he got us to where we had to be and where we are. Now we're leaning on him once again to help us figure out a plan for coming back into the church amid this pandemic. So in order to help him along, we thought it would be good to find out what the opinions would be of our congregation to certain questions. This survey is a hybrid. It comes from the New York conference, but it's been kind of tailored to be a little bit more apropos for Royal Oak First. So without further ado, I'm going to kind of go through these kind of quick and let you know how as a group you answered these questions. We asked you, when we reopen, which describes your attitude towards worship? And would you return? And it was about 50-50, a little bit more said we're going to return, but they'll return at the first opportunity, or we'll return with precautions, which we'll get to. We'll wait a few weeks to return and kind of see what happens. Those who aren't ready to return said they won't return, but they'll continue to watch online. Or they may return to work in small groups, but not for services. Or a lot said too that it may be quite a while before they're ready to return, and that's understandable. The second question we asked you was, what signals do you want to see before returning to worship here at Royal Oak First? And most of you wanted to be sure that the number of virus cases near us is very small, and that most social distancing recommendations have been lifted. A number of you wanted to make sure that a vaccine is available and that schools are open.
Jay, as I recall, this was one of these questions where you could select all that would apply, and the largest selection was the number of coronavirus cases being small, and that looks like only 43%. But the reality is, if you kind of look into the data, 3/4 of the people said something. So, some people said a couple of things, but this just shows you which were the.
That's correct. No, at least 3/4 of our respondents expected to see one of these things happening before they were willing to come back to worship at the church. Then we asked you what precautions you expect us to take here at Royal Oak First. And the vast majority of you expect the church to take precautions, and believe me, we will. Encourage social distancing. The vast majority, almost everybody asked for that. Providing hand sanitizer stations, requiring the wearing of face masks, discourage shaking hands, using a new method for distributing communion elements, propping doors open. So all this is being taken into account when we come up with the plan, and the plan that Patrick is currently working on for our reentry of this church.
Myra, one of the things that I notice as I look at it, the most selected category are things that are typical now in our world. The social distancing, the wearing of masks, etc. The middle section is mostly stuff that's unique to churches, like, differences in communion and in how we might do our offerings and our bulletins. And, I think that elsewhere in the world, we see a lot of things becoming the new normal. I'm curious if you've seen chatter in other churches. Are some of these processes just going to be different indefinitely?
I think so. I'm glad you brought that up. And people will notice that we are wearing masks, but we are taking them off just to speak so that we can be understood. But masks are required here in our church. When you come into the church, we are required, and we do wear them. But I think you're right. I think some of these things will be the new normal. We will probably always stay with the little communion, the individual communion cups that we have, or at least for a while, for the foreseeable future. I think we are seeing a lot of things that we will see for a very long time.
Then we asked you, what precautions are you willing to take? And 3/4 of you all said, at least, I will stand and sit in places where I will be at least 6 feet from others. I will avoid shaking hands. I will wear a face mask. I will avoid any physical contact. And I will avoid crowded hallways. 65% of you said, I will bring hand sanitizer. I will tell you that when you come back to church, hand sanitizer will be readily available for all of you.
Yeah, interesting here, Jay, I'd emphasize again. I mean, this is 80-90% range, people saying, I'm going to take precautions, which is, really, testimony to the congregation here. I know I, for one, didn't select the hand sanitizer. I thought, my wife will have it, and probably the church will have it. And we saw that in the other results, too. We expect the church to have it. So.
And can I add something to that? That's an important part of us being able to open.
Mm-hmm.
We cannot open if we don't have the cooperation of everyone in the church. It looks like we have it from this survey. Everyone's willing to do that. And that is the only way we will ever be able to come together and worship.
Mm-hmm.
We went on to ask, if you have children, would you allow them to attend? And 58% of you said yes, as long as precautions are in place. And 42% of you said not right away. So that's something we're going to work on. We're going to look at doing. And probably initially there won't be children's programs available, but we're going to take that into account, and we're going to, as this goes along, we're going to take a look and we'll look at what will make it easier to have children begin to attend again.
Yeah, and I know that, of course, we've shared this feedback with the Children, Youth, and Family team, and as many of you with children know, they are working on programs, related to choir camp and VBS and other activities that are, able to be done with social distancing or out of doors.
Or online.
Or online. Yep.
And I also think that they're going to probably view it on how the schools go back too. Will give us a little bit of guidelines as well.
Yeah, certainly.
We go on to ask which describes the attendance level at which you'd be willing to attend. The vast majority of you said half filled. Most people have empty seats either beside them or in front of them, is the way you'd like to see it. 1/4 filled. About a third of you said you'd be willing to come back if the church was 1/4 filled. And then 20% of you said none of these, at least right away. You were planning on coming back whether we were half filled or 1/4 filled.
And Jay, this is the very thing that I know you and Patrick and others are looking at in terms of literally the blueprints and the spacing and how it could work to fit the right number of people into the building. So everyone's taking this into consideration.
Correctly, and beyond that, not only the correct number of people, but logistically how we get them in and out, which we'll get to in just a second here. Then we ask you how flexible you'd be as far as worship times and locations are concerned. And 52% of you said you'd consider attending worship in an overflow room if we had to accommodate distancing, which we found to be encouraging because we can have that space. As far as would you consider attending worship at a different time to accommodate distancing? Almost 3/4 of you said yes. And we found that very encouraging as well because some of our services are better attended than others and we can kind of work from that. 7% of you said no. And I think we can handle 7% saying no and not being flexible. So we consider this very encouraging.
Yeah, and I think obviously it shows a great willingness to be flexible, and I wonder too if the sort of the not sure or the maybe answers are kind of a wait and see. If the time works for me, great. Odds are as we initially open, there won't be very many people anyway, and we'd probably be okay. But there's certainly a preference for a different time than a different location. And I recall one comment saying, something like, well, if I have to be in a different room, I may as well watch from home. And so, of course, one of the things we'd be thinking about is not just putting individuals in, cornered off rooms within the church, but maybe the parlor where we're sitting today, but spread out so that you can still experience some of the presence of being there, but not necessarily be right in the sanctuary. But of course, as we plan those out, we'll share it, and hopefully it'll work for individuals.
And the last question is are you watching the online services? Overwhelmingly, 94% of you said yes, you are. And then if you answered yes to that, we asked you how often do you watch? And you said sometimes 43%, but 57% of you said you watch all the time. So that being said, in the survey, we appreciate all of you that did answer the survey, and it's going to be very helpful to Patrick and the Compass team as far as coming up with a good plan for everyone to come back to the church. And in a nutshell, what I can tell you is some of the things you can expect is that we will all probably be entering in one entrance, safe distancing, and exit. We will all exit in another entrance, safe distancing. And there'll be, as I spoke of earlier, a logistical way that we seat you, a responsible way to make sure everybody's safe. You'll be seated by household. Patrick's working on the details, and when we get to that point, we'll share it with you. And once we have a few services under our belts, once we finally do reopen, we're going to ask you how we're doing and what you're comfortable and not comfortable with and what you've seen.
Well, thanks, Jay. And before we get into our re-engagement plan and the work that Jennifer and her team have done on that, I'd like to just mention the fact that we received comments. Of course, we asked for your comments on worship and other things in general, and it was really great to receive all of that. We've shared it with the relevant individuals, so worship-related comments with the worship team, Children, Youth, and Family with that team, etc. The comments really reflect the diversity of attitudes toward worship across our congregation, the kinds of things that the in-person worship over the years evolved probably to address, the 5 o'clock Saturday worship, the Sunday worship, the 9 a.m. and the 11 a.m. And, we heard things from, more contemporary music to more traditional music, a lot of compliments on the kinds of music and the work that have been done by individuals in the singing. I wanted to take a moment to actually compliment the team here that's been doing the work producing these videos. It's actually a significant amount of work. Pulling it all together was a total surprise, of course, to have to start doing it. And initially it was just a massive amount of work. They've continued to get better at doing that work, and also the quality and the ways it's being done and continue to improve even in recent weeks. So I want to thank Debbie in particular on the work she's done, and Myra and others who've worked on the online worship. And Myra, I know that it's going to continue to be a facet of life. So again, we've shared that with all the teams, and we look forward to incorporating things in the weeks and months to come. So now, Jennifer, why don't I hand it over to you, and you can talk about the plans for re-engagement and how we're working on that.
Last month, you saw our re-engagement plan be sent out. It's on our website. Myra announced it in her letter. We want you to know that we're working really hard on the re-engagement plan. We based it on the state of Michigan guidelines, the CDC, and the Michigan United Methodist Conference. As of now, we are in stage 4. That's the same as the state of Michigan, and you can see that on the next slide. And so on this re-engagement slide, you can see that at this point we are in phase 4. So that is 10 or fewer people together. I will tell you that we've had the last 3 weeks, we've had about 8 staff members in for a small staff meeting, and it was just really nice to see each other's faces. We are looking forward to going to phase 5, so then we can see more people and try to integrate back in safely into the building.
Thank you, Jennifer. And thanks to all of you for joining us tonight as we talk through how our church works toward reopening the building and coming together to worship. You know what we've proven? I think for the last few months we have shown that when we come together to worship, even when it's online, we are the church. When we worship together and sing together and pray together, when we make calls to one another, when we send texts and emails to check on each other, and you know what? We continue to feed the homeless right here at the church in a safe way every day. We are the church. And I know many of you are really kind of getting into this online service thing. I see the pictures of you, with your cup of coffee. And don't worry, online services are here to stay. And they will continue to get better. We continue to take in all of the comments that you gave us and look for ways to incorporate new things and new ways to make these services really engage and reflect our community. And still, we want to get together. We want to worship together once again. We want to be in our building, or at least outside on the lawn. I live on the lawn service isn't our future. Not yet. Not quite yet. We need to be in phase 5 as a state before we try that. Many of you came out for the drive-in communion, and that was a lot of fun to be out in the parking lot. It was a first step, a toe in the water of coming together. And I ask you to just please be patient with us. Be patient with the state. Be patient with our world around us as we try to find that right time before we come into the sanctuary together, a time when we know we can be safe. I want you to know that when that time comes, there are a lot of people working on it right now, working on a plan for how we do that so that it can be done in the most thoughtful way and in the way that is the most safe for everyone. Thank you for your patience, and thank you for being part of our church in helping us worship in whatever way that we can. God continues to move here at Royal Oak First in amazing ways, and we're glad that we can be a part of it. So good evening. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and give you peace. Amen.
Amen.